Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day talking BYU sports here on the legacy home of the Cougars. And BYU football is gearing up to host the UCF Knights. First time since 2011 that UCF rolls into Provo. I think it was a game where Blake Bortles checked into that game. It was Conference USA Knights versus FBS Independent BYU. A lot's changed in 14 years. Now it's Big 12 on Big 12, and BYU's looking to get to the college football playoff. But the Knights have other plans as they look to clinch a berth to bowl season. And to talk about those Knights, I'm joined now by Chris Boyle, reporter for the Daytona Beach News Journal, covering UCF. He will be on location here in Provo for this game on Saturday. And Chris, welcome on in to the show. How would you describe how this return of Scott Frost at UCF has been in year one?
Well, first off, let me go back to that game from 2011. How about Kyle Van Noy being BYU's leading tackler? That's a throwback. Like
Yes.
it feels like he's been in the NFL forever, and that so we date all the way back to his college era with that game. Scott Frost's return at UCF has been interesting, I would say. It's been largely well received. I think most fans are pretty understanding with the amount of turnover that needed to happen this year from a roster perspective. Bringing in 63 new players is going to be, it's essentially year zero for this team. It's a entirely rebuilding year. And yet, when you think about at the end of the day, they've won more games than they did a year ago. They are 5-6. They were 4-8 last year with a better team, with a second round pick as a running back and RJ Harvey that was the focal point of the offense. They beat the teams that they're probably supposed to beat on paper. When you look at beating teams in a very similar spot, North Carolina, they took care of business at home back in September. They handled West Virginia pretty easily, and West Virginia's actually looked pretty good since then. So that looks back, that ends up being a better win with the benefit of hindsight. And then Oklahoma State, a team that's struggled for 2 years in a row now. It wasn't easy, but they got it done and won that game last week, 17-14. So all things considered, I think when you look at it holistically, I think UCF's done an okay job in year one. The recruiting certainly has some question marks. There's not a huge high school class as things stand right now. I think a lot of work will be done in the transfer portal starting in January. But all things considered, I do think UCF is in a healthier position for competition's sake going into next year, just from finding a few pieces that they hope to retain and that they hope they can build with, particularly on the defensive side of the ball.
UCF comes into the game 5-6 and looking to get one more win to go to the postseason. They haven't won a game on the road this season. What's been the big issue away from the bounce house for this UCF team?
I mean, take your pick. You can list a number of things that have gone wrong on the road. I mean, you start with just the scoring. They've averaged 10.8 points per game, 43 points in 4 games away from home. That includes a 30-3 loss at Baylor back at the start of November, and Baylor has been one of the worst defensive teams in the Big 12 this year. Pre-snap penalties have been a killer. Drive halters, particularly at Cincinnati, if you go back to that game in mid-October, felt every time they got any sort of momentum going, they had some sort of crippling penalty, whether it was a hold, whether it was a chop block, whether it was false starts, which were very routine in that game. That's been a major issue all year. And really for the first time all year, I feel like Scott Frost, after the Oklahoma State, more or less, waved the white flag. They are what they are, right? They are not going to solve that issue this year. They're going to hope it for next year. But I think particularly in an environment as loud as BYU is, and with the kind of players they have defensively, I don't really foresee that being any sort of a quick fix. I don't think it's going to be any better this week than it has been the 11 games previously. So that's one issue for sure. And the last 2 times they've gone on the road, their defense, which has been pretty solid all year long, has gotten into some quick holes. They were down 14-0 against Baylor in the blink of an eye. They were down 21-0 at Texas Tech, 1 play into the second quarter. They're not getting any help from their offense. As I mentioned, they're not really driving the ball very much, and they're sent back out into the field quickly, but they haven't started well defensively in either of those games. Although they have settled into them as the days wore on, I think that's definitely been an issue they want to try to correct. They want to try to get BYU off the field or hold them to a field goal in the first couple quarter or so, and at least give themselves a puncher's chance.
Talk with Chris Boyle, UCF beat writer for the Daytona Beach News Journal. You can check out his bylines there and also follow him on X, Chris Boyle, DBNJ. And I'm curious, Chris, with this UCF team, I used to think with UCF, and they kind of branded themselves as the future of college football. Is there reason for optimism, regardless of what happens this weekend for UCF, that this thing's going to turn around and they're going to continue to build into the future and become really one of those programs that looks like they're always on the cutting edge, particularly offensively? Because I think for me, that's kind of what surprised me the most since they joined the Big 12 is that offensively, they're just not the teams that I kind of identified UCF as in the past.
Yeah. When that quote was really a Gus Malzahn thing, and it was around when he took over in 2021. And I think at that time I was a bit more optimistic about it because the trajectory of the program, you go back to 2013, they won the Fiesta Bowl against Baylor. That was their first ever New Year's Six bowl game appearance and victory. They go back in 2017 and run the table, go undefeated in Scott Frost's first season. They go undefeated again in 2018, lose the Fiesta Bowl to LSU. But since then, it's been a bit of a gradual decline. They did make a bowl game the first year as a Big 12 program. They were 6-7. They played in the Gasparilla Bowl that year. But I think the biggest thing is that this future has coincided with just wholesale changes in the game. You look at Texas Tech, I think is obviously the prime example right now of what can happen with gigantic booster investment. And UCF does not have that. They do not have it, certainly to that degree. They have some, but they don't have Cody Campbell money. They don't have, the types of influential figures that can just simply cut a check to bring in whoever is needed at premium positions. And let's face it, the fortunes of Texas Tech have changed overnight, given the all-in mentality they had going into this year to go out and acquire premium established college football players and it has paid off for them. And I think that's what makes me a little bit more skeptical about UCF long-term is I don't know if they're going to be able to recruit at that level. They're going to try. They're going to try to be smart about it. They're going to find guys and they've done pretty well in the portal. They found a good number of pieces that will help them not only this year, but should help them into the future if they can retain them. And I think, of course, that becomes its own challenge year on year to recruit your own roster. But on the whole, I think they are a team that I expect will be a winning program in the Big 12 eventually, but maybe with a ceiling that's a little bit lower than I think myself and UCF's fan base probably envisioned when they got the invitation to this league.
Looking at this game on Saturday, Chris, who are the key players to watch for UCF? If for a Cougar fan that's getting familiar with UCF, who are the players that they need to know?
Yeah, I'd start with the tight end as of late, Dylan Wade, who's an Orlando native, transferred back home after 2 years at Maryland and had a big game on Saturday against Oklahoma State. He had 4 catches for 145 yards, 2 touchdowns, started the second half with an 84-yard catch and run that was the longest passing touchdown of the season for UCF. So that was kind of that explosiveness that maybe you would assume from a UCF offense. It's just been very hit or miss throughout the year. Caught a touchdown on 4th down in the 4th quarter to tie the game as well. And then had a 50-yard reception up the seam that set up the game-winning field goal. So he's been very impactful as the year's gone on. He's caught at least 3 passes in his last 6 games. So I think certainly kind of the offense is really going through him right now. Same to be said about, Miles Montgomery as a leader. Depends on if he's available. I know the shoulder injury he's had has been bothersome to him, but he ran pretty well against Oklahoma State, and he's had his moments throughout the season. Defensively, this is a pretty good unit. I think they've done a really nice job. Alex Grinch got a lot of flack when he got hired as the defensive coordinator here based on how things finished at USC, but I think he's done a very nice job making this a responsible unit that can go out and win a ball game. They held Oklahoma State to 27 yards one first down in their last 6 drives, all encompassing for the second half, including a game-ending interception for Braden Marshall to wrap it up. Defensively, the players I think to watch, definitely the 2 defensive ends. Malachi Lawrence has 7 sacks. Nigel E. Kelly's been a force as well at various points of the season. Lewis Carter and Cole Kozlowski, I think, have done a really nice job in the linebacking room. 2 new additions, one from Oklahoma, the other from Colgate. You talk about 2 various ends of the spectrum. Then you've got the defensive backs, I would say. Jaden Bellamy has been really tough in coverage this year, and Philip Dunham set a program record for single game interceptions. He had 3 picks against Houston, so and won Big 12 co-defensive player of the week honors. Those guys, to me, are among the standouts for what, again, has been a pretty good UCF unit, particularly at home.
And I wanted to ask you too, another player, Taven Jackson. He wasn't the week 1 starter, but he's been the starter at quarterback pretty much the most of the season. Your thoughts on him? And he's only a junior in terms of eligibility. Do you think this could be, win or lose, a springboard to next year as being QB1? What's your outlook on Taven Jackson?
It's been up and down, and I think that's kind of to be expected for a guy who's really coming into his first full year as a starter. He was expected to win the starting job coming into camp. To Cam Fancher's credit, he outperformed him and had the veteran leadership skills of having been a guy who started that week 1 game at 2 other schools in Marshall and Florida Atlantic. But he left before halftime in that first game, took a back injury, had some broken ribs against Cincinnati. And Jackson has been tough. If nothing else, I think you have to salute the guy's toughness. He's hobbled off the field even as recently as the second quarter on Saturday. He had a shoulder injury that he had against Kansas State where it looked like he was done for the day, if not for the year. He took his shoulder pads were off. They had to cut his jersey at Kansas State, and then he ended up going back into the game the second drive of the third quarter, which I've never seen before in all my years covering football, to see a guy go, take his shoulder pads off and then run back out there and play quarterback. So he's earned some respect, I think, certainly in the room and somewhat, I'd say, among the fan base. He's thrown 8 touchdowns, 8 picks. 7 of those 8 picks have come in the last 5 games, so it has been a bit bumpy. What he's got to do is he's got to show that he can perform and lead this team on the road, even if it doesn't result in victory. I think they just want to see the ability to overcome adversity with the amount of struggles he's had away from home this year. And I think that will honestly dictate whether or not he ends up being the starter next year. I think there's certainly a possibility of it, but I also think that they could be very aggressive in trying to find a bridge to their 2 true freshman quarterbacks coming in for 2026 as well.
Last thing for you, and again, talk with Chris Boyle of the Daytona Beach News Journal, covers all things UCF Knights. Check out his bylines there at the Daytona Beach News Journal. How do you see maybe the effort of UCF in this game? And I bring that up again because, coming out west, long travel, going to be a huge underdog. It's going to be cold. Do you expect this UCF team to bring a lot of fight to this matchup and try to make this interesting and maybe spring the upset on BYU?
So I think the cold's going to affect me more than it's going to affect the players. I'm not accustomed to this. I've never driven in snow before. I've never driven in snow before, and there's potential showers on Saturday, so I'm a little leery. I'm wondering whether I need to Uber to the game instead of renting a car. But I think the effort will be there. I think certainly there are players that are accustomed to that. Jackson's from Greenwood, Indiana, so that's not going to be overly foreign to him. Jaden Bellamy, we asked him about it earlier. He's a guy that's from New Jersey, played it the last couple of years at Syracuse, although they do play in a dome. Certainly he's familiar with walking around in some very small temperatures. So I think those guys will be up for the challenge. I think it's not going to be maybe as cold as we anticipated it potentially being. It's going to be cold, but I think there was certainly a chance that this game could have been in the teens, and it wouldn't have surprised me. But it's going to be closer to like 35, 40 degrees, and I think that's a little bit more in their wheelhouse. The problem is I just think they're outmanned. I just think this is a veteran BYU team that has an established culture, an established identity, an established attitude and air about it that I think is going to be something that UCF can't really compete with right now. Now, I don't think that's necessarily always going to be that way. I do think that at some point the gaps will narrow a little bit. But right now, with as much as BYU is playing for, with a dominant home record over the years that can't be undersold, I think BYU is just in position to really win this game and potentially do so in impressive fashion. Because I do think, and we talked about this on, when you came on with me earlier, I don't think it's necessarily about trying to prove a point or embarrass somebody, but I do think style points matter a little bit. I think you want to win this game by multiple scores to give yourself any sort of potential advantage, or even a safety net if you don't beat Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game, to be in that at-large conversation. Because quite frankly, I thought BYU got jobbed last year. I thought, and I've got no problem going on record about this. We forgot. It's like everybody forgot they beat SMU in September last year. It baffled me that they weren't even really involved in the conversation for the at-large spot when they beat the team that was the last team invited. So to me, I think any sort of leg up you can get, and I think it helps to be able to show that the success has been sustainable from 2024 into 2025. But I think BYU just needs to go out there and take care of business and let everything kind of fall in place from there.
He's Chris Boyle. Again, you can follow his UCF work at the Daytona Beach News Journal. He'll be on location in Provo. Cougar fans, if you need to help Chris get a ride, show him to drive in the snow, help him
Food
out.
recommendations. We need that, and we need some sightseeing potential. I think I might check out the Jazz the night before. So if you got anything in mind, send them my way.
Yes, send them, and I'll make sure to send some as well for you, Chris. But appreciate you hopping on board, giving the lowdown on the Knights, and enjoy your time out here in Provo. And like I'm flying out as well too, so I'm enjoying this Florida weather as well. I don't want to leave either, but got to go back to the cold of Utah here soon. But appreciate the time, Chris.
Yep, safe travels to you, my friend. Thank you as always.